Welcome, everybody, to our monthly Masters call for the month of February. We've got a guest here, Rande Howell from the US. Thank you for coming,
Oh, you're
Rande.
welcome. You're welcome.
Rande has been our guest, I think, 2 years ago, and he talked about, well, he's a renowned trading psychologist. You live in North Carolina, I think in Charlotte, right? We met there about
Yeah.
15 years ago when I came and visit you. And so you're a trading psychologist, and you're specialized on emotional regulation of peak performance activities. I don't know if that's what you call it, but you're
It's
specialized
close
on
enough.
traders.
It's close enough. Yeah,
Yes, you're specialized on traders, right? And
I
you
am.
apply your archetype approach. So this is the introduction, and that's it's yours.
Well, okay. First of all, welcome everybody. I really appreciate people showing up on Friday afternoon. And the first thing is I'm going to assume you don't know who I am and who is this guy who is talking to me. I am a what is known now as a trader psychologist. I used to be a therapist, and one day I was also a performance coach, and one day I was doing a piece at a spiritual retreat, and I did my little piece, and a guy came up to me and said, Randy, I really liked that. That was just really fantastic. And I understand you're a performance coach. And I said, yeah, and I was desperately trying to get out of being a therapist because I didn't like having to work with clinical people. And I really wanted to work more with self mastery. And he said, well, my business is that I'm a hedge fund manager. And I looked at him, this is 18 years ago. And I said, what's a hedge fund? And so that was my introduction to trading in the whole nine yards. Fortunately, the skill sets that I developed in working with some highly specialized populations of like PTSD and at-risk youth and stuff like that, the skill sets worked quite well with trading. And so it grew. And before the years we could count very, very far, Dolores and I, and that's my wife and my partner, that we just really started specializing in traders. And that's what we've done for the last 15, 20 years. What makes me different is that I come from an emotional intelligence background. I'm looking at thinking as a behavior that the neurons do. And and in that emotional intelligence, what I understand is that all thinking is emotional state dependent. So what you're doing is we're often people are trying to eliminate their emotions and say, no, I don't want to have emotions. But from an emotional intelligence perspective, you're trying to use emotions smartly to be able to build a mind for whatever you're asking that mind to do. And in trading, it just so happens you're asking a brain built for short-term survival, controlling environment, and getting chased down by saber-tooth tigers and stuff like that, and attacking woolly mammoths. You're asking that brain, which did really well, of basically making a certain world, even if it had to deny the reality that they were really in danger. You're asking that brain to do something completely different, alien to it, and you wonder why you have problems. And the truth is my work is really based on how do you take the brain that evolution gave you, and how do you tweak it, and how do you work with it to be able to move it into the trading arena so that what you're dealing with is this uncertainty and high risk. Okay. And what happens, unfortunately, the brain doesn't understand money. It's back in the caveman days of where it wouldn't know what to do with capital. But it symbolically isolates money and and bonds it to guess what? Power, the power to survive. And when you're looking at trading and all of a sudden you're looking at, okay, I'm risking capital and I'm ignoring emotions. The emotions trigger simply because there is a change in status on your chart. You don't have a choice about having emotions unless you want to be dead. So the deal is that we have a brain and emotions that rise out of that, and cognition that arises out of that, that simply is not fit for what you're asking it to do. So with emotional intelligence, what you're doing is saying, okay, if I can't stop having emotions and be rational, then how do I go about building a mind that responds to uncertainty very differently than the programming, the ancient programming that we're endowed with? And that's really what my programming is about. That's what I do is I teach really a process. I don't teach magic. I don't teach a couple fixes. What I go through is I already know that the brain you brought to trading is not going to work, and you're going to have to reorder that mind in order to be able to get the mind that can work in probabilities. And it starts with a very radically different understanding of what emotion is. And for me, I come to emotion recognizing that emotions really are a biological action potential. Okay. Nothing about thinking there. That coordinates activity between the organism, that would be you, a trader, and the environment, that would be the market. And anytime that there is a change in status on your charts, there is, by definition, the arousal of an emotional response. It's going to happen. And the deal is how can we go about mitigating that? And the first thing is you begin to go, emotions aren't what I thought they were. In fact, you don't have emotions. They have you. You don't have emotional beliefs that are at the limbic level. They're creating your experience. And what you discover is thinking, this highly touted thing that we want to be, is actually its biggest thing that it does is it creates alibis and explanations for what the emotional brain, the caveman brain, has already decided. And so when you get into situations, I don't know if any, I don't know, you guys could be the people who just are cool as a cucumber and never have problems in trading and have the patterns set down so that you're just pulling more capital out of the markets than you're putting back in. But the people I work with, including people working in offices in Geneva and New York and all the way down to homes in Florida and Texas and stuff like that, is that what we're doing is saying we're going to recreate their training on a limbic on a very primitive basis of how you're responding, and that's what I'm interested in doing. So that would be that's the early understanding that would you'd really need to even begin to go, what is this guy talking about? And the next thing is, if you recognize that all thinking is emotional state dependent, you have to start saying, how do I go about regulating the emotion? And fortunately, the yogas from 4,500 years ago taught us that it's about breathing and it's about how tension accumulates. Because ultimately, breathing and muscle tension are actually part of an emotion. It's called emotional arousal. And if you happen to be holding your breath, or if you happen to be tensed up, looking at your screen, looking at your chart, the emotion has already triggered. Now it's building up a head of steam. And if you're not emotionally intelligent enough to spot it, and by the way, that's just learning. Emotional intelligence is very flexible. It can be learned. An IQ is kind of stuck in a range. But the thing is, you're sitting there, and if you can catch it, and you go, okay, what I know is breathing and tension are part of that. If I release the tension, and if I am able to breathe diaphragmatically, I can lower the intensity of the emotion so that it doesn't hit a threshold of where it just flips, and suddenly the chemistry of that emotion is in your body, altering the way you perceive reality. That would be called tilt. Okay. And so just there, you start going, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn how to breathe in a bellows way, because that type of breathing style produces a calm state of mind, calm, alert, focus. And the body is not triggered to activity yet, which you do not want to trigger your body, because it's biased to head toward fight flight. So You start with the breathing because you begin to understand it as part of the arousal of an emotion. But then you go, okay, well, what's more is that you also have this emotional motivation is what the emotion is trying to do. And it's called attack, avoid, approach. And when you're sitting there and you see something change in your charts and it's going against you, there's a choice as that emotion grows to whether or not it's going to go attack. Well, I'm going to fight it, or I'm going to hide from it, or I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm going to get out of the trade and I'm not going to do anything for the rest of the day. That's the motivation. And then you're going, okay, now we've gotten, okay, it's triggering, it's growing, and then it has a motivation that it's biased preload about how it's going to behave based from past learning, limbic learning. And then you're going, okay, well, then what triggers though is it gets to the actually in neurobiology it would be called a limbic learning. Uh, we call it a belief, okay? But we end up having a set of beliefs about our capacity to manage uncertainty. And out of that, you can look at your P&L statement and it will tell you how effective your beliefs are to manage the challenges of uncertainty with risk involved. And if you happen to notice that you're giving back more money than you're extracting, then what you're looking at is ineffective beliefs about the management you have about the management of uncertainty. And you need to get to the beliefs that are driving the emotions and the cognition about what you're trading. And most of the time, it's about your mattering. It's about your sense of worth. It's about your adequacy. It's about your belonging, your love, whether or not you're lovable, and believe it or not. And you're trying to prove that you matter, prove that you have worth, prove that you're adequate by winning. And the trading gods are going to eat you alive doing that. And it just so happens that most of us have grown up in families with histories that is just simply the way that we perform for generations upon generations upon generations. And trading is going to require you to change that formula. You're going to have to disconnect your performances from your sense of being. And it's one of the weirdest things when people in my work get to chapter 4 and they go, "Oh my God, Randy, are you telling me that we're going to have to start feeling the sensation of inherent worth?" Yeah, you're going to have to separate your performances from your being, and all of a sudden you're winning or losing doesn't say anything about you in this emotional intelligence perspective. Winning and losing just talks about your competencies, they need to be improved or not, or whether or not you have to come to another understanding of probability. I mean, really good traders are still losing 40 and 50% of the time. They just know that their winners need to be about twice as large as their losers. And doing that, you're going to extract the capital that you're looking for. But they've really redone the whole understanding they have of winning and losing. Winning becomes only landing on the right side of probability relative to you. Losing only means landing on the wrong side of probability. It has nothing to say about your worth, about your mattering, about your adequacy. And that's what you, as this really glorified, I hate to say this, what we are great apes that have just taken stuff beyond anything we could imagine, but we still carry the very primitive, ancient limbic system with us into our humanhood. And our thinking brain tends to be blind to that caveman brain and can't see it. And tomorrow, if you trade and you have some sort of video feed on your face and shoulders as you trade, watch it, because you're going to all of a sudden you're going to start noticing how much tension you carry in your face and your shoulders and how you are not breathing. That is that ancient social mammalian brain of yours. And it is going to have to get domesticated. And ignoring it or pretending it's not there or trying to force your will upon it or being tough is it's just simply it's going to turn into a 600-pound gorilla. So the main thing is that first key is that you're learning how to regulate the emotion so that it doesn't sweep you away. But that by no means is enough to make you a winning trader. There's another tool that has to be developed called mindfulness. It actually was called observation, and that was a Buddhist concept. And John Kabat-Zinn at Boston Mass Hospital was bringing that in, and he languaged it like he took it from Buddhism, so he thought he would just imply it that way, and it really upset a lot of people. And they renamed it to mindfulness, and all the hub roar just went down. But in mindfulness, what you're doing is you're coming to a recognition that you and your thoughts, you and your beliefs are not one and the same. Excuse me. And when you recognize that, you realize, oh my God, I need to become an observer of what's going on inside my mind. Because ultimately, I look at that, I look at your brain as a community of rival emotional programs that are truly duking it out for control of the construction of the self. Okay. And if you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, the first one, that's exactly what you're seeing shown. You're actually shown how these emotional programs are totally in competition with one another, and they also get cooperative to build the mind of a girl who goes out and just kind of falls flat in her face. But you're looking at that and saying, okay, how do I learn to quit identifying with thoughts as me? And how do I begin to recognize that I need to pay attention to what these thoughts are saying and what their motivations are? Okay. But without mindfulness, you don't get to the door of the mind. With mindfulness, you get to the door of the mind and you open the door and you begin to look in. That's when it starts getting interesting. Because in my teaching, what I teach, the first thing I teach is what I call the bad news, is I teach that you have what would be, you could call it an archetypal influence from a Jungian perspective. It's called a lot of other things, but ultimately, all of us as human beings have a very highly destructive part of ourself, whether or not we like it or not. And we also have a highly constructive part of the self. And I call that destructive part of our nature, I call that the inner critic. And what you discover about the inner critic is that it really it's not your friend. And most of us are doing everything we can because we want to be positive, we want to this and that and the other. We ignore the inner critic, and we don't. And by doing that, you just leave the back door of your mind wide open. It gets to enter, create all sorts of havoc in your trading. And then, and you're going, why did that happen? I try to be so positive. This isn't about positive or negative. This is about building a mind that you can bring in that is highly stable. But that inner critic is part of your life. And if you don't believe he's there, when was the last time you had self-doubt? When is the last time you fought to enter a trade that you knew was not right, but you wanted to jump in anyway? You'll hear that. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Or you'll hear, get in, get in, get in now before it's away. Get it now. That is what I call the force called inner critic. Okay. And if you translate, if you go from the Aramaic of the word Satan and then you pull it into modern English, it wouldn't translate as the devil or anything like that. It would translate as prosecuting attorney. And it just so happens with the concept of the inner critic, what you discover is you have a prosecuting attorney in your head. Now, it might be keeping you out of setups and something like that, but it could also be having you jump into trades that you don't want to be in. And you're going, but both sides is that prosecuting attorney wants conviction. It does not want justice. And it's just built, it's the dark side of the force versus the light side of the force, okay? And so you're going, oh my God, this is running around in my head. and I've been doing everything I can to ignore it. And what I'm saying is, no, your job is not to ignore it, it's to master it. And you're not going to beat it up, but you can master that element of the self so that it does not show up at critical moments and starts messing with your thinking. And if you don't believe this part of the self is there, just keep trading and start noticing what happens when you either fall into fear or fall into aggression. And you will hear that voice there. Okay? Remember, all thinking is emotion state dependent. And if you're acting from fear or aggression, you can bet that the emotions are that of the inner critic judging, criticizing you, okay, are getting you to jump into things that you have no business jumping into. There's also another part that Carl Jung calls the orphan. That is how your brain has adapted you to survive short term in the world that it's been thrust into. Goes, here's what you need to know about attachment and that really early infant stuff is that we human beings, when we're born, our brain is remarkably undeveloped. It has not, it has not started building the way to survive in the environment. Other social mammalians and other animals, most of this stuff, you're born with instincts. Like a giraffe, within 3 hours, that giraffe is up and running. We can't do that. We are born, uh, and we actually haven't really finished gestation. We had take another 9 months of external gestation to be able to bring forward and catch up with the chimpanzee at birth. So you're looking at it and going, now that brain is involved in a family system, and it's figuring out how to adapt to that system. And in an attachment model, ultimately an attachment model, secure attachment is when you feel like you belong, you feel like you're cherished, and you feel like the family system is letting you be a kid and learn. And unfortunately, what found many years ago in the 50s and 60s is that's what we used to think was, oh, that's normal. That's what everybody is. It's actually rare. It's only about in 10, 15, 20% of the cases. We generally, as this brain is teaching us how to survive in the environment, we develop two other attachment styles. One is anxious attachment, where you develop a kind of an anxiety about, oh my God, what if don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. And also another one where, the thing is you don't necessarily trust stuff and you push it away. And that you start looking at this in your trading. Are you coming from anxiety or are you coming from aggression? And that is determined in the first year and a half of your life. So, and the studies that were done, it was called Strange Situation. And what they discovered is that dairymen knew more about attachment than Western science did in the late 50s and 60s. The dairyman knew that he wanted the milk, and the cow had to get pregnant to get the milk. But then afterwards, there was this calf that needed the milk too. And what they found out is that they weaned the calf off of off the mother's milk, and they were able to maintain her as a milker. But the thing is that the calf needed to be around the mother enough so that he became a social cow. And understand the human beings used to take the baby away from mama at the first hint. And they discovered that was producing a disaster in terms of the health of how that fetus developed into a baby and into a child and into an adult. So we got this complex mix that shows up in your trading. And by the way, anytime you want to ask a question, go ahead and do it. Okay. This is just, I was told to give you an idea of what I do, and I'm showing you the process that I use. And if you have questions, jump on it. I'm not giving a presentation. I don't have to wait till the end, but if you have questions now or later, I'm open to them. The next thing that happens is that you discovered not only is there this adaptive response that I call orphanal, there is also instilled in you by evolution, by life, you have the discipline, the ability to maintain order of a ruler. you have, and these are emotional programs slash archetypes. Okay. You have the courage of a warrior, the ability to turn toward your fear with the intent to master instead of running from it and pretending that you're this tough guy or woman. And you don't want to let anybody know that actually you have fears inside that you really should deal with. You also are equipped with the self compassion of a caregiver. And most people look at me funny and say, "What? How is that important in trading?" Massively important. Let me ask you, have any of you become a better trader when you've beaten yourself up? I've been asking that for 20 years, and nobody has said, "Yeah, I love beating myself up. I've become a much better trader." No, a response to losing, really, if you're trained well, is to come from compassion, to actually understand that it hurts, and that if you learn how to talk through it, to work through it, and to move through the grieving process, you can actually learn to become a better trader. It's compassion that can take an old pattern, an old neural pattern that has been really bugging you. It is compassion that will actually tease that network apart and reorganize it around higher functioning. Powerful stuff. And then at the last, if you have those three emotional programs up and running, what you get is you get the ability of another emotional program, the impartiality, the clear thinking of a sage. That's what you want doing your thinking while you're trading. You don't want fear based or aggression based triggerings that the orphan and the inner critic are doing. So now you are developing the subpersonalities within you that allow you to build a completely different governing committee of the mind. Because ultimately, when your brain produces mind, what's happening is these emotional programs that are running and producing community, they're given voice as your thoughts. And what your job is really is like is a CEO or even a chairman of the board, and recognizing that you have a mutiny going on inside your brain, inside your mind, and your job is to learn how to get rid of some programs and develop other programs so that you have a working group that can actually work in probability and not get triggered to ancient fear patterns. Okay. And those, what you want is the ruler, the discipline. You want the warrior, the courage. You want the caregiver, the self soothing, and you want the impartiality of the sage as the major voices in the head when you're trading. You can learn to do that, but I can tell you, if they're not there, if they haven't been developed, I can promise you other emotional programs will come in. The real estate in your brain is enormously competitive. Is the current theory now as to why we dream? Is because the visual cortex sitting back here would get invaded at night when it's locked down if it didn't dream. By dreaming, the space is there, there's stuff going on, and the invasion from the other areas, other special interest areas, doesn't happen. So there you go. But you've gotten these elements now. And then what I do is I ultimately teach people how to take that new mind and start applying it to the uncertainty, to the kind of the combat zone of trading. And you develop it so that it learns that that's when it's supposed to appear, and you start working with it. And before you know it, what you've got is you've brought a very different mind to manage uncertainty rather than the one you started with. You have an intentional mind rooted in discipline, and courage, self soothing, and impartiality, rather one that is talking about what if, or like, get it right now, get it right now. This is what can be actually taught. Okay. And before I started working with traders, I was using it with PTSD, at risk youth. I used to run groups where my referral base was criminal court. It was it was juvenile court. It was DSS. So I had interesting groups I was running that they had to go through my groups in order to have a better a better way of getting out of jail and a better life. So, and what I discovered is cognitive behavioral therapy just simply failed when the going got tough. And that's when I moved into emotional intelligence, which much more suits the way that I perceive the problem. So that's kind of who I am and what I do. And I didn't intend to become a trader psychologist, but I did run into this hedge fund manager, and I discovered that the traders were a lot more motivated than the clinical folk were. And I've had about 20 years of guinea pigs that I've been able to work with, and I just had a great time. This is like fun to me. So, any rate, that's what I do, and it's kind of like how I go about the approach, and literally what I teach, whether or not it's in a group or whether or not it's in an individual basis or whether or not you're reading my book, I teach the same process. I lay it out, and I had it one today is that they write me and say, "Thank you for your YouTube channel. It has taught me, and I have now been profitable for a year." And I'm going, now how did he do that? It was not my intention, but there he is. He's using the materials that literally are free out there, and they're using them to help them build the mind that engages uncertainty rather than the one they brought. It can be taught. Okay. Now, Gabriel, I've kind of explained who I am and what I do. What would be your next line of reasoning?
Well, the next thing would be to have a practical example, to have a meditation. So if you can run the group, like we close our eyes, right?
Yeah.
If you can run the group through a quick meditation, well, I know your meditations, so they're quite
Well,
short
I
as well.
well I'll make a shorter one. I tell you what though, I'm going to do this. Is that the other thing you need to know about me is that I've had a heart transplant. Okay, and I am on drugs that allow the heart that I have not to be rejected by my body. Okay. And in doing that, I take a lot of drugs, a lot of meds. And one of them that I take makes me have to go to the restroom a lot because I have to constantly fueling water. And I'm having a moment like that. And it's just something I don't like it, but it's just, I like being alive. It's really cool. It's a lot better than what I was facing. So what I ask is your indulgence. I have to go to the restroom. I'll be right back, and we'll do a guided meditation. You can think of this as a commercial break, and Gabriel is going to supply the commercial. Okay? You can silence him, but I'll be right back.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Thank you for your indulgence. It's just one of those things where um, it is what it is. But what I want you to do, I want you to just take a moment, and I want you to kind of sink into your body and start noticing it. And what I want you to notice initially is this, is where's the tension? A lot of people keep tension in their neck, in their jaw, in their eyes, maybe even their hands. It could be in their thighs. What I want you to do is to scan your body and say, where do I hold tension? And notice that, and just notice that that is muscle tension, and that is emotional arousal going on right now. Okay? Next thing I want you to do is to notice your breathing or the lack of it. Notice if your chest is moving up, and notice that if the abdominal area moves out and pulls air down the throat into the belly, expands, holds, then the breath comes up into the top layers of the lungs, and then you release. And as you release, I want you to notice how easy it is for the muscles and the tension in the muscles to start draining, start draining, start draining, so that you can actually feel that they're getting loose and limp, like a sleeping baby. Then I want you to continue that, moving air into your nostrils, down your windpipe, down into your belly. You'll see it expand. And after it expands a little, it goes up into the top lobes of your lungs in your chest. You stop, you release, and as you release, again, you start noticing it's like opening a faucet and draining the water from it. You can see the dripping of stress, the dripping of tension, the dripping of tension as it leaves your body, as it leaves your body, and as that drains, start noticing that you feel more and more loose, loose and limp, loose and limp, like honey flowing out of a jar, until you just recognize you are actually calming down. The muscles are looser, are looser, are looser. Your mind is calmer and calmer as you continue bringing air into your nostrils, down your throat, into your belly, expanding to chest. Hold, releasing. And as you release the breath out into the universe, you're also letting the draining of tension continue out of your body. You can feel it draining from your head, from your eyes, from your jaw, from your chest, from your gut, down your thighs. And the tension just goes out your tippy toes. And you're continually breathing. And as you're sitting there, you're getting calmer and calmer, more and more relaxed. And you're noticing how important breath is just to the calmness that you can hold, how the tension in your body, as it releases, it allows you to get into a completely different space. And one more time, move air into the belly, expand to chest, hold, release slowly. Let that breath just release through your body and let the tension drain, 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 drain. And then imagine that you're walking down a hallway. You're passing doors as you go by, but there's one door that you're interested in. You come to that door finally, and it's an elevator. You press the button, the door opens, you walk onto the elevator. You hit the closed door and you can hear it just slide closed. Then it starts the descent and you start going down, 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 down. And as you go down, you continue your breathing. But as you notice as you go down, you get calmer and calmer. You keep going down, 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 passing floors, going to your destination. And you finally go all the way down. You're calmer and calmer. The door opens and you walk into a deeply, deeply relaxing place, a safe place where you can let your guard down. And you walk around and you smell it, smell the smell that's in this place. It could be like at a grandparent's house, it could be in the forest floor, it could be anything. And then what do you see? Start noticing what you see in this deep safety. And then what do you feel? Pick up an object and look at it and go, yeah, this is even feeling great. And what do you hear? Depending on where you are, from a beach to the mountains, you might hear birds, you might hear rustling water, you might hear the surf. And then as you get down, just lay down in this safe place and allow yourself to relax. Allow the surface below you to just totally hold you in its embrace as you actually just sink deeper and deeper into this deep, deep sense of peace. Deep, deep sense of peace. And as you're sitting there, lying there in this beautiful place, you have a dream. You're walking on a beach. You hear gulls above you. You hear the water lapping at your feet. You're walking on the sand and you're realizing just how beautiful this is. You're breathing in the salt air. It's a perfect temperature. And the water's cool, but it's just perfect. It's just perfect. As you walk along, you say, you know something, I think I'm going to go into that water. And you start walking into the water at this beautiful, perfect temperature. And as you walk in, you start noticing that this is not water that you're talking about. You're actually walking into an ocean of light. And as you walk further and further into it, you start noticing that you start dissolving into the light. You allow yourself to actually dissolve completely into the light and notice that in that light, there is no darkness. In that light, there is deep sense of being. There is a deep sense of connection to everything else in the universe. You're part of the light, and the light is part of you. Let that just wash over you, wash over you, wash over you until every part of your body just flows and just becomes at peace with itself. And as you're sitting there breathing, allow yourself to say, you know, I know how to get here now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back because I like this deep sense of serenity that I am when my name is gone. I am just part of a much greater whole. And I know that I come from this and I will always belong. I will always be cherished here. And now I'm ready to go back to the real world and bring this little slice of my being and start recognizing that it's always been there. All I have to do is place my attention on it to bring it forward into my working life. So you get out of the water, you're walking on the sand, you go back to the elevator. You get on the elevator, you hit the top button, and you start going up, start going up, start going up. You're getting more and more awake, more and more awake. You're coming close to, you're coming close. It's there. You're fully back now, fully back, wide awake, eyes wide open.
Thanks a lot. Well, let's open it up for questions.
And my question will be, how was your trip to the beach?